All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another episode of Chairman of the Boards. We are down a chairman, unfortunately. Mason, I think he was at the Australian Open playing tennis as one of the contenders, world champion as he is, injured his ankle, unfortunately, and he's currently at the doctor. So I don't think he was actually at the Australian Open. Maybe he was, but he was definitely playing tennis and got an injury. So he's out today. But in his stead, we have none other than Ron. I think we found out on the last episode we did with you, Jehoshaphat, I think was your middle name, Manelli, RJM himself. Ron is here with us, and we're gonna get a little nerdy today, which I'm pretty excited about. And we're gonna go into a product Ron has been working on and released, and basically it deals with an issue I have had for years. And it does much more than this issue, which we will get into, but it solves a big problem that I get asked all the time. And it does much more than that as well. And so we're going to be chatting about that today. But Ron, why don't you say hi and tell us how you've been doing at the beginning of this year, and we'll get into the product for today that you've been working on.
Hey guys, good to be back. Just been, just been keeping busy here. We always got more stuff going on. Always got, a dozen or so projects.
Nice.
Most of which I cannot talk about yet, but yeah. So this project here, the Smart Multibox, ta-da,
nice.
is something that I started on just last year, and it's just something that I've been thinking about for years, and just in talking to guys like you and customers and all that, it was pretty evident there's just lots of weird little Midi things that are problems, and they're just and it isn't just like one problem or two problems. It's just like lots of little random weird problems that have come up over the years. And it just, we just couldn't figure out, like, okay, well, I don't want to I can't make something to fix like two guys' problems, it's like, so the idea is, let's make something, that's a little box that's like fully programmable, even by the user. And let's, make something like that where it's just, real kind of Swiss Army knife kind of thing, where it just can be programmed and set up to just solve whatever happens to be going on in a rig and whatever challenges they have.
Nice. So if I were to look at this thing, the Smart Multibox, if I were to look at it from the outside, I would say, oh, it's a MIDI splitter. And you've obviously made some significant changes. You've done your own take on what this should be. So at the end of the day, what would a typical MIDI splitter merger have on the inside, without going into too much detail? But what's really different about this from a top view? Like, what's the main difference in your approach? Why is this something to take note of over a standard MIDI splitter merger?
Okay, yeah. So I mean, the two main things that have been around forever in the MIDI world is a MIDI through and a MIDI merge. Or the through or the splitter is just an input, and then it goes to one or more outputs, and it's kind of the MIDI equivalent of a buffered splitter. And so there's no brains in something like this. It just takes whatever comes in, and it boosts the signal so it doesn't get degraded by being split, and it just sends it out to however many outputs there are there. And so that's like the really simple case. And then there are MIDI mergers, and there have been for many years, and they have multiple inputs. And what it'll do is take those inputs and combine them together. Unlike audio, you can't just combine MIDI together. You can't just wire it together. Because basically, if you've got like two MIDI controllers, or a MIDI controller and a computer or whatever, and they're sending, if you just try to like tie the wires together, it might actually work in some cases, but as soon as they start sending at the same time, it just won't work, because the listening devices can only listen to one thing at a time, and so you'd get a massively garbled signal. So a merger has to be a merger basically needs to have some brains in there, and it actually is a microprocessor, and it's actually receiving the messages and kind of queuing them up and kind of acting like a traffic cop. And it's like, as
okay.
they come in, it hangs on to them. And then it says, okay, well, now we can send this one, and now we can send this one. And so it keeps them from colliding and just kind of lets them, through like that.
Nice.
So that's kind of like the next level up. And those have been around for quite a while. And you don't need a huge processor or anything, but you do need something. So you need memory to be able to store these messages as they come in, because if they come in, they probably, if they're coming in too fast, they can't come out until there's a time and sort of a slot for the message to come out. So that gets a next level complicated. And so what we did is we said, well, okay, that's great, but let's have 2 inputs and 4 outputs. And out of the box, it kind of runs in this sort of basic mode where basically anything coming into the 2 inputs will be merged together safely so they can handle whatever comes in, and then just sent to the all 4 outputs. And so that's kind of just the basic mode is a merger and a splitter kind of in one. And then and I'm kind of building this up, so it's kind of, this thing is kind of in layers, I guess, and in different modes. And so that's the next thing that kind of puts it on top of the previous things. And then it also has a USB-C port, which we added, and that basically lets you plug it into a computer or a tablet, and it'll it's a USB to MIDI interface, like one of those cables you would buy or whatever. And so you plug it into your computer, and it will show up as MIDI ports in your DAW software or whatever, and you'll be able to say, like, so if you're using it with Ableton or Pro Tools or something, you can say, like, hey, send these MIDI notes out of Smart Multibox output number 3, and that'll work fine as well. And so there's a specific mode. There's a little button on the side you can hold, and it'll switch it between that merge and through mode, and then this USB to MIDI mode, and then sort of the last thing, and this is the thing that makes I think this product the most interesting, is that it has a script mode. And this is where it goes like way beyond any of these other boxes, where we, instead of having a little microprocessor in here, we have a pretty serious one in here, and it's basically a full computer. It even runs the Python scripting language, which a lot of coders would be familiar with. Wow. And so you can actually say, like, and this is where we get into that thing about, like, I don't want to solve specific problems. I need to solve lots of people's weird little individual problems, at least their MIDI problems, not all their problems. Anyway, so basically, if you can write a script and say, like, hey, I've got a controller that sends CC messages, but Ableton wants notes or something, and you can tell it, you can write something to take in incoming CCs and translate that into notes, or
Nice.
And it just it gets tricky, because it's such an open-ended thing that you can just basically need to have the problem, I guess. We need to know what the problems are before we can tell you,
and
whether
then you can solve them. Yeah. Well, you did. Sorry, Brian. Brian, please.
I was saying, you posted a thing about the expression, how you programmed like the heel to do something, but then when you went to the toe, it incorporated something. I saw you guys post about, I think it was yesterday.
And you did Morse code in there as well.
Yeah, that was a fun one. We put that on Instagram yesterday. And it was, I basically wanted to, like, come up with something like really odd that, like, you couldn't do with anything else. And so basically what we did, and that is one thing I neglected to mention, it also has a TRS input, and you can plug an expression pedal into it, or a 2-button foot switch. And with the scripts, you can have it send MIDI messages or do things based on whatever the expression or the switch is doing. So I just wanted to come up with some crazy idea, and so what we did, I have an H9 and a Big Sky, and so I set it up to control both. And basically, when the expression pedal is all the way back, it would set the Big Sky to be, like, pretty much all wet, and then there's a little bit of phase coming from the H9. And then as you moved up, the more dry signal would get dialed into the reverb, and the phase would get more intense. So it kind of get a little more, kind of come into focus a little bit as you moved it up. But then the where the strangeness comes in is basically I wrote this script that basically literally generates Morse code of just the words RJM music. And I had that basically use that to trigger CC messages to the output volume of the H9. So it was basically doing pattern tremolo on the H9 on this Morse code pattern. And so, as I said in the video, maybe not the most practical, demonstration, but it just kind of shows that you can just do really unusual stuff with this, and it's real out of the box kind of stuff.
Interesting.
Love it. It's very cool. And this is where, I don't know if you feel the same or not, Brian, but this is where I personally, when it comes to MIDI stuff, I mean, the bulk of what I have to do is you have a MIDI controller, you have your PBC 6X or something, and you're talking to 3 or 4 pedals via MIDI with the combination of the loops. It's like, I want this preset on with this loop on, that one off. And it's quite repetitive. Like there's a lot, maybe you're programming in some expression over MIDI as well to do a few things. But when I hear you talking about scripts and Python and all of this, like this stuff is so far over my head. I don't know the problems I need to solve yet. Like you're kind of saying, like you need to come up with a problem, and then this should be able to help you out with, figuring out that issue. So I guess my question on the scripting side, I think a lot of people would be in my boat of like, that sounds cool, but I don't know where I would use that. And I certainly don't know how to program Python. Is this something that you guys, I would assume for a fee if you do, but do you offer like, tell us your problem and we can put in some time and solve it for you? Is that an option with this? Or is it more you'll point people to the resources so they can learn how to write their own scripts? Like what's kind of the step in this area?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I know this is kind of could be an obstacle for some. I know there's like some small percentage of guys that are like, yes, Python script. If you're one of those people like me, that that's pretty exciting. But yeah, I recognize that for the majority of people, they're going to be like,
us mere mortals.
Normal people will call you. But so basically, there's a few things. For sure, we'll write scripts for you. For this introductory period, it's gonna be free. For I can't remember what our limit was, but basically, if you order now, we'll basically contact us. We'll come up with scripts. We'll tell you if it's even possible, but then if so, we'll write it for you, and then after some introductory period, we'll probably do it for like $50 or something like that if you don't want to get your hands dirty. The other thing is that if you're kind of in the intermediate or Python curious level,
nice. I like that.
That the editor comes with some scripts in it. And there's a button on there that just says download scripts. And we have a sort of a little database online that I keep adding to as I write scripts. I kind of keep tagging them in there. And so you can download, and they're at least so far the ones we've had have been, well commented. And so, basically, like, for example, we've got a script that just sends expression data, and it could one that just does one pedal, and then one that just does one CC, and then one that does 4 CCs. And basically, we have it set up so it's like, it's a script, but at the top it says like, here's where you set the CC number for output number 1, and here's where you set the CC number for output number 2. So you don't really need to know how it's mechanically working. You just need to edit some numbers in the script.
Yeah.
And so, so something like that would, that's not too scary, I hope. And that's an option as well. And as we, write more, there's going to be more scripts for more purposes. And, we're hoping that we think as guys like you and our end user customers start using this, I think it's going to start becoming a little more clear. Like there's going to be certain things that people really end up using this for, and we want it to be applicable for a lot of things. But I think that there's going to be certain things where this becomes like the silver bullet for certain problems that a lot of people have. And so when things like that are identified, we'll post that script for people to.
I love that. I want to tell you the problem that you guys solved by making this box. Before we get there, though, I want to throw it to Brian to tell us about some of the sponsors that make the show possible, and then we'll get into that problem that you solved for me and a lot of my customers.
Love it. Awesome. Well, the first of our sponsors are the guys over at the Guitar Sanctuary, who will likely be one of them that will stock the small multi-box as they do stock other RJM products. So go check them out, guitarsanctuary.com. They're in McKinney, Texas, over in the Adriatica area. So hit them up, shoot them a text message, email, message them online. They would love to set you up, get you a switcher from RJM, and get you going on your new rig. So check them out, guitarsanctuary.com. Next will be the guys over at Neural DSP, who we use on a daily basis. I use pretty much every week. I have a couple of their units, the Quad and the Nano, and they have a discount code Chairmen, CHAIRMEN, for 30% off, which is 70% away from free on all of their plugins. So make sure to go check them out at neuraldsp.com. If you try to use that Chairman code on a plugin and it doesn't work, that means that plugin is too new. It's not past 90 days. So make sure you check them out. It does not work on the units. It only works on the plugins. You won't be disappointed because those plugins that you purchased, if you have a Quad Cortex, you can actually transfer some of those at the moment, some more coming to that device. So you never have to skip a beat from your studio to your live performance with your plugins. So check them out. NoDSP.com. I'll throw it back to you, Grant.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, so I'll tell you the scenario that I come across a lot, and I've never had a easy fix, let's call it, where I'll be chatting to a customer about a setup. We'll be planning it out, and of course, with a lot of the pedals these days being computers, like the Big Sky, the Timeline, all these other devices that have MIDI and updates and apps and all these things that work with them. They want an easy way to plug into one box, the USB cables or whatever it may be, to this one box and update it. So with Strymon being the big one, you have to get a slightly frustrating cable to update the pedals. And then you have to plug in the MIDI in, the MIDI out, and then you can connect to Nixie and you can update it. And with the multi-box, you can now plug in your chain of MIDI pedals with the MIDI in, MIDI out. And let's say you have a Timeline, Big Sky, and a Mobius. I only know a couple of people that have all three. I don't know if you've ever heard of people owning all three, Brian, but they are out there. And now you can plug all of this into the multi-box, plug in the USB cable, plug that into your computer, open up Nixie, and everything will show up on your desktop. Mm-hmm. And that alone for this box, I don't care if you charge $400, $500, people will buy it for that feature alone. And it's obviously not that expensive for the Smart Multibox, but just that is a big problem that has been solved with this. And I am very excited to be able to implement it just for that, plus everything else it can do that we've been chatting about. And so I don't know if that feature was just a little, oh yeah, that could be cool to add that in as well, or if that was just a byproduct of adding in the CPU, like the microprocessor and everything. But on behalf of everyone that plays Strymon pedals and other boxes that can be updated like that, I just want to say a big thank you, firstly. And was that something that was hard to do, or is this just something that hasn't really been, I don't know, easily solved? I know there's workarounds for this currently, but not as simple as what the Smart Multibox has to offer.
Basically the thought was like, okay, I know this needs to be a really good USB to MIDI interface in addition to its whole scripting thing. And I spent a lot of time on it. It's surprisingly difficult to get right. The whole USB thing is still pretty scary, dark magic kind of stuff for me. But after throw a couple months at it, and it works out. And so it was, maybe not a real stated goal, but but it really fell under the umbrella of like, this thing needs to work with, everything that's on a desktop and just, work correctly with all that. And so, yeah, so it was something that I was hoping to cover. And, it's kind of this whole product sort of casts out sort of a wide net to trying to catch a lot of problems. And that was one of them. And I should mention that the other thing that kind of makes it, a step better is that because it's also a merger, that you can use it for this purpose with the Strymons and all that. But there's a second input there, and you can plug your, say, Mastermind PVC or other MIDI controller in there, and it can talk to the Strymons too. So basically you have that MIDI loop that you need to go from the box to your one or more Strymon pedals and then back. But then you can also interject your MIDI controller into that as well. And that was definitely one of the main things is to be able to have a computer and your MIDI controller be able to talk to the pedals at the same time without causing problems.
Love it.
So one of the things I want to add to about just that feature with the hub and everything is like, I've run across this with a couple other company MIDI pedals, is that sometimes they don't have like a MIDI merge option on some stuff. So like when you're running the Nixie software, it can be really like hit or miss. Like if it's going to pick up all the pedals. And I'll have plenty of people like, oh, hey, I took off the Mobius and I got this new pedal added in, and they're like, I did all the settings, but it doesn't have a MIDI a merge or something. So like it's not passing all the signal through, so Nixie picks it up or whatever. I've had it happen a couple times. What I love about this is how we were talking beforehand is you can go into the box and you can go say output 1 and then I guess out of the last Strymon and go back in to complete the MIDI circuit. But then you have outputs 2, 3, and 4 that you could go to that other, say an H90 or to a time factor or something. So they are still getting all the same MIDI signal, but those extra MIDI pedals are not in the Nixie MIDI chain. So like it's creating that circuit without any interference, which I think is really cool. And it just also makes it easier to like with MIDI splitting and stuff. So that's a really cool like feature that you're not, everything is getting the same signal at the same time, but they are not interfering. Because I've had a couple of like the Pictronic, like a looper pedal did that. Like I couldn't get it to pass MIDI signal, so I had to get like a MIDI box 4 from another another company. And that would do the splitting, but then there wasn't a way to route it back in. It was a whole mess, and it took like 5 boxes just to complete the signal chain. And I was like, this is awful. So the fact that this is all in one, and what is the power? Like, is it just like it's 9-volt, obviously. Is it a couple hundred milliamp or is it a lot?
No, I want to say it's like right around 100 milliamps, maybe a little less. It will, excuse me, it'll also power off of USB if you want to do that instead. Excuse me, like the 5-volt standard USB as well. One thing I should mention also is that this works specifically with some of the things that we do in a lot of our products with phantom power and bi-directional MIDI, which is kind of off spec kind of extensions that we do, and this box supports that, where you can have this box, like say you've got a Mastermind GT or something like that. You can plug the Mastermind GT's power supply into this box and then run a 7-pin MIDI cable and it'll power it. You can't do that if you're powering the box with USB, but if you power it directly with a DC adapter, it'll pass power on to whatever's connected.
With a much higher current consumption, obviously, to be able to pull that off.
Right. Yeah. That's why you definitely need to use if you were to power something like a Mastermind GT, you would want to use the GT's adapter to power the box. The box is pretty flexible in what it takes. It's like 9 to 12 volts, and it can handle the current demand. As long as the power supply can handle the current demands, the box can also handle the current demands for the controller that it's powering down the line.
That's so cool.
I want to tell you about a new sponsor that we have for the show here, D'Addario. I know you've heard of them. I know you love them. I've been using their strings for ages, and the strings especially, I'm such a huge fan of. But they've come up with a couple new products that I want to tell you about that you can check out in their Expand series. The first is an adjustable daisy chain. So if you need to put a rig together, lightning speed, analog pedals that are safe to share power with, check out their adjustable daisy chain. And it also, you can add in a battery pack, 10,000 milliamps, so 10 plus hours of playing for the average size pedal board here. And you don't even need to plug into the wall. So if you are powering a silent rig in hotel rooms, or you just have a gig on where power is harder to come by, you don't even need to plug in your pedal board. You can charge it up ahead of time, use their battery pack, and you are good to go. For those pedals that are a little bit trickier to power, something that needs isolation, maybe it has a clock, Midi, some sort of screen on it, they also have a noise isolator that galvanically isolates that pedal in the environment of this battery pack and adjustable daisy chain. So definitely check these out. A lot of the info is down below, but you can get 15% off strings and accessories for your first order of $75 or more. Go to the link below, which is daddario.com/chairman. Make sure you are logged into D'Addario's Players Circle reward program. That's a mouthful, but I got it, to activate that promo. Whew, we made it. So D'Addario, check out their X-Band line. Their NYXL strings are the ones that I really enjoy, and you can save big. Can you tell us there's so many questions I have, like, when would you do this? Or what have I never had to do with all these different options, scripts being one that we've already touched on. But with bi-directional Midi, can you explain it to someone like a lot of my customers? And let's say I'm brand new to Midi. I'm not only am I Python curious, I'm also Midi curious. Where does bi-directional Midi come in? Where is it most useful? Where do you typically see it on a rig? What's its purpose as far as a guitar rig is concerned?
Yeah, it's sort of a rare thing right now. Midi 2.0 will probably change that, but for the time being, it's only supported by a couple devices, including our own. But the most common by far is Axe Effects and Kemper rigs. And so the idea is that you connect like a Mastermind GT to your Axe Effects or Kemper, and the idea is that not only is the controller able to control things on the effect box, but the box can also communicate back to the controller. And so some of the simple things are, like, for example, you want to be able to see the tuner display. You turn on the
nice
Kemper or the Axe Effects tuner, and if you have that path back to the controller, it can the tuning happens on the effect unit, but then it can send the actual tuning results to the Mastermind. It'll display that on the screen. And
so if it's in a rack or something 30 feet away from you, then you can still get this tuner info on your pedal board 30 feet away, whatever it is. Yeah. Great.
And so,
which is one of my favorite things with the Meg. The new Meg does that too. It does the tuner. I love that.
The Mini Effect Gizmo has that ability as well. Yeah, and so that tap tempo as well. That you can have the unit send basically it sends a message every time that every beat, and so you can have something flash on the controller, so you can sort of have a remote display for that, and then it keeps going on from there. Like for example, you can download the preset names from the Axe Effects or the Kemper, and then even like effect block status and all that, where you select a preset on the controller, but then like the Axe Effects or the Kemper communicates back to the Mastermind and says, okay, on this preset, your drive block is on and your delay block is on and your reverb block is on, and the Mastermind updates those buttons accordingly to show you which things are on at the moment. And so it's pretty darn useful. And I mean, that's been, we've been an early supporter of that since Axe Effects came out. And basically it's just the bidirectional thing really makes a lot of sense in certain cases. And so those are the main brands that actually support it extensively. And we try to, when a brand chooses to support and put in whatever MIDI stuff is needed to make that happen, we try to, correspond and support it on our end as well. And so the idea the whole thing with the Smart Multibox is that it will allow this to happen. All the MIDI merge and through boxes I know of on the market don't pass bidirectional MIDI, so you would have to do some kind of elaborate thing with. And I know bands that have done this with like elaborate splitters and multiple boxes, and sounds kind of like what you were talking about.
Complications.
Yeah. So this one, it's like you can connect connect a cable to the mastermind, connect one or two cables to your Axe effects, and it'll just handle the communication in both directions without interruption or anything like that.
So speaking of bidirectional, do you know if there's like any, because you were saying like the fractal, if something is turned on the fractal, it updates it on the controller. Do you know if like the neural, does the neural do any type of bidirectional with your stuff yet?
Not currently that I'm aware of.
That's what I thought.
We've been talking over the couple years, and I'm hoping that we can make it work. But it's not, to my knowledge, hasn't been implemented yet. But
gotcha.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Well, especially with the amount of quad cortexes you see in racks, like even from BTPA, the amount of rack rigs that they build, it's like, it could be, excuse me. Now I'm getting choked up, Ron. It could be really handy to have something like that, because then you can just I guess, for lack of a better analogy, the two units, the MIDI controller and then the quad cortex in a rack, let's say, they can have a conversation back and forth and say, yeah, I just did this. Cool. I got that, and pop it up on a screen on stage. And it just seems like it would get rid of a friction point in that context.
Yeah. It's definitely a nice feature, especially in the more, complex modelers that have a lot of things going on in there. It's nice to have the status work really well, the status reports and that kind of stuff that go back and forth.
Yeah. I'm such a sucker for the 7-pin like powering, because I've bought, I've had purchased and sold maybe 5 or 6 PBC 6s and 10s and LTs. Like I've had them all multiple times. My personal rig just changes so much that I'm always experimenting with new stuff. And I just recently picked up an LT from a guy locally, and it just reminded me of how much I just love the simplicity of that 7-pin cable, because like it powers, whatever. I have an expression pedal, and obviously that's not powered, but like I have an expression, or if I have an expression pedal from Lely, I have the dual expression that can be powered through the RJM and stuff, and it's that one type of cable. So having that feature in this box and then doing the GT, I think I asked you guys a couple of MIDI questions this week on an old rack gizmo for a build that I'm doing, and it was that simple, like 6 or 7 pin cable. I think it's really cool. I'm really excited about this because I'm going to go test the whole Nixie looping option on my board with it now, knowing the fact that it's a MIDI hub, and like with the MIDI communication, it's so hit or miss sometimes. So hearing like that, it's like it's going to connect it and there's not going to be a hiccup, just makes preset building so much easier. So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, Brian needs his presets.
That's right.
Yeah. I don't play a lot, but I need to have a million presets. So
don't we all?
I'll be fine. But yeah.
That's amazing. Cool. I think one of the things, and I would like you to correct me if I'm getting any of these points wrong, Ron, but I think some people might be asking, like, man, my board is working perfectly fine right now. Maybe I'll add another pedal or two in the future as far as MIDI is concerned, but this might seem like overkill. And I think one of the things in my mind, specifically for something like a MIDI splitter that comes in handy on some of the more complicated MIDI rigs that we would do, is a lot of people they'll tell me their current MIDI chain and they've got like 8 pedals connected one into another. Like you're asking for trouble. And this is something I've talked to you about in the past, and you've informed me on, the limitations. And please correct me again if I'm misinterpreting any of this, but I've always told people that including your MIDI controller, your series chain of MIDI pedals. So you go from your PVC6X to your Timeline, to your Big Sky, maybe to your Mobius H9, and then maybe one or two, just from MIDI in to MIDI out, to MIDI in to MIDI out to all these devices, should not exceed roughly 5 units. Would you say that's a good neighborhood to be in?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the MIDI Association's recommendation, and the standard is 4 past the controller. And and that seems like a safe number, but it really varies, and that's like kind of in a way even worse than it not working at all is like where you get
intermittent
gray zone where it intermittently might not work, or depending on the situation and the venue you happen to be in, or it's just unpredictable is not good. And so definitely you wouldn't want to you want to keep it to the MIDI controller plus 4. And so having something that splits is definitely really a good idea if you start adding more things.
So then if you have like 8, let's say you have 8 MIDI devices plus the controller. In this instance, you could go MIDI controller into the Smart Multibox, and then output 1, you could do 2 MIDI devices. Output 2, 2 MIDI devices. Output 3, 2. Output 4, 2. So now you have 8 MIDI devices, but your chain is only going to be the MIDI controller, the Smart Multibox, plus 2 devices on each output. So your chain is low enough on each output, but you still can power a whole bunch of devices.
Right, because it doesn't really count. When you sort of fan it out like that, it's the length of the series chain that matters, and not the kind of the horizontal where you have like four ports that basically counts as one, and really not even that, because it gets a little more complicated, but that's a good rule of thumb that should get you where you need to go.
Well, taking a step further, I know we're about to throw to an ad. So how about you throw to an ad, and then I will project my very complicated setup.
Well, you have some complicated ones as well.
Well, I have one with a rack. I have this rack back here, but I'll wait to say it until after you've talked about our wonderful sponsors.
All right, we're gonna hear about Brian's complex rack here in just a second. But before then, I want to tell you guys about BTPA, one of the sponsors, one of the longtime sponsors that have made this podcast possible. And Brad at Bestronix, also known as BTPA, is a wizard when it comes to helping you finish off your pedalboard. He is musical Gandalf. And you go to Brad, you have some problems you need to solve. Maybe you need some connectors or some raw parts to finish building your rig, or some advice or some looms, whatever it is. Brad can find you the parts that you need to finish off your rig. And he's also offering a 10% discount if you use the code DACHAIRS, DACHAIRS at btpa.com. You'll save 10% on your order. You'll get the parts you need. Your rig will be up and running, and you will be off to the races playing your next gig. So check him out, btpa.com. Ask for Brad. Tell him the chairman sent you, and you're going to really enjoy what he has on offer. I also want to tell you, all of you Canadians, more specifically, all of you Canadians, about GB Music and Sound. Greg over at GB Music and Sound. The G is for Greg. Yes. I don't know his middle name though. They are in Red Deer, Alberta in Canada. Obviously he can ship anywhere in Canada, but the showroom that he has, it is impressive. The brands, the gear, the way he displays it, extremely knowledgeable, very helpful. So if you're in Canada and you need to get some advice on gear, check it out. He also has a cafe on the grounds there, and he knows coffee, because I first met Greg in Australia when I was living there. He is a incredible monitor engineer, so he does fallback and monitors for gigs and stuff like that as well. Really knows his stuff. So I would love it if you guys went to check out GB Music and Sound, see what he's done with the place. If you can use the link below in the show notes, it helps us as well. By using that link, you support the show, and it just helps Greg know, like, oh, the guys from Chairmen of the Boards are sending people over to my store. Thank you. And then we get a little kickback from any sale that comes through that link, which helps us put on these episodes. So thank you guys in advance. Check out GB Music and Sound if you're in Canada, and you're going to really enjoy it. And stop by for a coffee as well in Red Deer, Alberta. Brian, it's time. The complicated rack. I'm hoping, it's never happened yet. I'm hoping that we can stump Ron one of these days, but I just don't see it happening. But maybe today's the day. Maybe this will happen right now.
I don't think it's not, I think it's actually it's not even a stumping. I think it solves the question. But funny enough, as you were talking about BTPA, I feel like that, like, if there's an acronym for what BTPA stands for, it's like Brad's Tenacious Pedalboard like Assembly or something, because Brad is a wizard when it comes to these association. Yeah, because like these redundancy quad cortex racks that when they're like kicking out like 32 like a month, like one a day, they look amazing. But no, what this solves for this rack that I'm doing back here, it has 6 trays, and it has 10 MIDI devices, but each tray basically is a different brand. So it's like, you know, all the big box Mirrors pedals, so the Enzo X, the Mercury X, all those X ones. Then you got a Strymon Timeline Big Sky Mobius Blackout, like you got those. So you have all these different trays. Well, what this comes in handy, I just realized, is that I can send this one MIDI out to each of the 4 trays. Ironically enough, I have 4 trays that need MIDI. 3 of the trays can go to each of them. The 4th one can go to my Strymon tray, and then out my last Strymon pedal back into the box, and I can still use Nixie. Like, I don't have to do this weird Uno, like I have that Roland Uno whatever USB to MIDI through boxing or cable that I've used in the past, which is very convoluted. But this just like solved like a ton of routing that I was going to have to use multiple boxes. Like, just thinking about like, oh my gosh, like that solves the issue. And also like pedal boards related to have like this underneath, you know, you can run one to each another, or pedals that are all over the place. So I'm super excited for the fact that how small this is, and that I can do that as well as the expression. Like, the expression thing is really cool. So we have an expression that we're going to be using on the board. So yeah, I just realized when we were talking, like, oh my gosh, that solves my 4 tracks need MIDI, trays need MIDI. I had a MIDI box, the I don't know what it. I don't know
MIDI
what
box
it's
4.
called. Not a MIDI box 4, because that's MIDI the 5-pin, a 5-pin to quarter. But it was like the ones that have to have phantom power. One source, or I can't remember the company. They do a bunch of those like quad. Oh, it was a quadra through. That's what it was called.
MIDI solutions.
Quadra through MIDI solutions. Yep. So I had a couple of those, but the problem was I wasn't getting power to the through, so I was having to figure that out. So this solves my rack build that I'm about to finish up in the next couple of weeks. So I'm super excited for this. So thank you again for creating it.
Absolutely.
So it's not even a question. I just realized, like, I had that as you were talking, I was like, oh my gosh, that can solve my issue and still provide the hub for the Strymons, because it's a studio rack. So he'll have the rack in his corner, and then he can easily have Nixie on his computer and adjust stuff. So that's exciting. So
cool. Another problem solved. I like it.
Another problem solved. Another thing it can do. So yeah. Oh my gosh. No, that's great. I love it.
Oh, that's awesome. Anything else, Ron, that we haven't really covered yet that this would typically be used for, or have we kind of covered the main bases that the general musician would use on their MIDI rig?
Well, I mean, yeah, I've been trying to think of some other things, but I think maybe one thing that wasn't clear is, for example, what if you just need another expression pedal in your system, and your MIDI controller only has, one input.
Nice.
So because this can merge, you could just, plug in your controller into the input, plug in your expression pedal, and then have it, generate, MIDI based on the expression pedal, then merge those sort of new messages with whatever's coming from the MIDI controller. And so you can, add that in, or have a, 1 or 2 button foot switch that, generates more messages. And so it can, in a way, be a little simple MIDI controller on its own.
So you could, if I'm hearing you, let's say you have a PBC6X or a PBC10, our preferred MIDI controllers here on Chairmen of the Boards. You have one of those, which by default, if you just have the MIDI controller, you can add 2 buttons with an external switch. So you can add, an extra 2 to the 6 or an extra 2 buttons to the PBC10, which I, by default, I'm not sure what you guys do on yours. I, by default, set those as page up and page down, and maybe put a hold function or a second press, or I guess it would just be a hold function in that case. But if I'm hearing you, we could go MIDI out from the PBC10 to the Smart Multibox and get another 2 foot switches programmed in to do whatever I want. Is that true on the RJM, or would that be 2 switches? I'm just thinking of the chain of events here that I could then use to control the MIDI devices after the controller.
Well, it's not part of, the mastermind or whatever, it's its own thing. But that said, first of all, you can program it to, send any MIDI messages you like through the scripting. And actually, because of the bi-directional thing, it could potentially, for example, like a mastermind PBC will accept CCs to do like bank up and bank down, for example. So the Smart Multibox can actually communicate back to the mastermind on input 1, which is bi-directional, and tell it, hey, this is, bank up, bank down, or, select a specific preset or things like that.
Like a global preset or something.
Yeah, or basically anything that's accessible through a CC message. And so, it could not only control the rest of your rig, but it could actually talk back to the PBC and act as an extension to it as well.
So good, because I know, like on the PBC6X, a lot of people aren't aware of this. Is that you could use it instead of 6 loops, some being stereo, some being mono. You can use it for up to 11 mono loops. But the thing that I find tricky with that, and I've used this many times. So right now I have a 6X board that is packed. Every single loop is being used. And that's common. But the downside is then you don't want to have a MIDI controller with, 13 foot switches on it when you're trying to have something as compact as the 6X. Like, that's one of the beautiful things about it, is its size. And so to be able to add extra foot switches, even if it was taking off something that is only used for the MIDI devices, a global tap tempo override or a global preset or whatever it is, bank up, bank down in song mode, to be able to offload those switches somewhere else and then use the ones on board the 6X for other useful features. I just see that as being a huge perk. And I just really... Yeah, I'm just trying to think, like, as I'm talking, like, man, there's so many ways you could use this. And so I get really excited about that, because I think that's a huge add-on that you could do for something like this, and just, make it very useful for the end user when they're in these types of situations, which from my experience are quite common with a lot of these types of builds.
Yep, for sure.
I love that.
Yeah,
that's great.
I think the probably the thing that put me over the top on this thing, where I said, okay, because I've been thinking about making this for years. So the thing that really where basically having enough people complaining about like quirks in certain pedals. Like, I don't know if you guys have run into the running status problem. Do we know what that is? It's basically feel fortunate that you haven't run into this, but not naming any names, but certain MIDI products use this thing called running status, and I'm not going to get into the details, but it's kind of like MIDI shorthand, and it's officially part of the MIDI spec, but basically not all devices use it. And so anyway, basically it's an easy way to make things not work. It's just
okay.
It basically breaks things. And so this is something that we can fix that. Like, I don't know if you've seen a pedal where if you send it a program change, it it ignores MIDI for a short period of time after you give it a program change, like milliseconds.
So it needs time to reset.
Exactly, time to load up the preset. And again, not naming names, but there are some that have been like that for years. And basically, if you try to say like send it a program change and then a couple CCs like right after, it'll drop some of those. And so we can use this to actually delay the messages. And I've
a script.
Yeah, I've written a script that basically either just sort of speed limits all the messages, so like they can only come out every so many milliseconds, or a more specific case where it's like, hey, if you just send a program change, don't send anything for another 50 milliseconds. And so these weird little cases, but that when they're in your rig and you want to use a certain pedal, and it just has some quirk, you're either you have to use a different pedal or you
have to severely limit how you program that.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is made it a lot easier to address that kind of stuff.
Man, that's awesome.
And other, especially older stuff, like if you send it, sysx messages or other kind of like weirder MIDI stuff, some of the stuff doesn't handle it, and so you can actually filter messages as well. And so it's all just those kind of things are what we're trying to go after, is those specific edge cases that there's just no way around them.
Yeah.
Until now.
That's
brilliant.
amazing.
Well done, Ron. And I know that we talk about RJM on the show all the time as being our favorite MIDI controller. I think in large part due to the edge cases that you've been able to address over and over, and you address enough edge cases over time, and then eventually it's like, yeah, the PBC can do that. Like, it takes care of that problem. It takes care of this problem. You can go into such detail and depth. And the thing I always tell people about the RJM controllers is the biggest limitation, and you've gotten this from some of my dumb questions over the years, Ron, but the biggest limitations is not the unit. The biggest limitations is the user, as in there are multiple ways to get to the result you're after, or to fix the problem that needs to be fixed with these controllers, because you have been addressing, you have a better way to say it maybe is you've been listening to customer feedback and addressing issues for so many years now that it just does everything you need it to do. Whereas a lot of other companies that I find a little bit more frustrating, I run into limits or walls that they're like, yeah, no, can't do that. We're not going to fix that because it makes it, to this or to that. It's just not the issue. And so I think I'm just really grateful for the approach that you've taken as far as listening to the customer the way you have. And this is just another example of that, of it's not necessarily going to be for every single person out there that uses MIDI, but for all of the people that use and rely on MIDI, and they're trying to just, let creativity or their ideas kind of just go, and that comes up with some interesting cases. Like, well, just this will do it for you. This will fix the problem. And so it's cool to see, I don't know, a new take on a splitter and mixer, or splitter and merger, and then some, and then all these other things that kind of come into it. So I will say as well, one of the things that most people don't think about when they're buying a MIDI controller or a product like this is, I wonder what the customer support's going to be like if I run into an issue. That just doesn't seem to come up. But you have the best customer support. You are the gold standard for customer support and how to treat your customers. From my experience over the past 15 years, I think I've been using RJM products, and I have never once gone more than a day to 2 days max without hearing from you, usually same day, and always considered patient. This is just me just gushing over you and RJM as we do all the time, but I'm just really grateful for it. And I know that, I'll be very clear, you are not sponsoring this episode. We don't get paid to say this stuff. It is from experience and from dealing with you over the years. So big thank you for creating a product like this, and for the PBC6X, for the MegX, for the PBC10, all these products that we rely on and recommend to our customers, because they truly are standout products. And I'm just excited to see what comes next after this. But in the meantime, this is going to get me out of many jams on the pedal boards that I build and our team builds, and just solves some really great problems that needed to be solved easily. And so it's really cool to see and to be able to chat to you about this.
Yeah, no, it's I always appreciate you guys using our stuff, and always appreciate the feedback and all that. And I think this one in particular, I mean, it as you said, that is kind of our thing. Is just just we're not really afraid to make things that have a lot of options, just because we just want to be able to address as much as we can. And so, well, really looking forward to what customers are going to come up with this thing, and that's kind of why I have the crazy demos and stuff like that, because it's it really is kind of a blank canvas for doing MIDI stuff. And so we've got some pretty advanced customers that I'm sure will surprise us with what they come up with, and looking forward to that.
Love it.
I was actually this is a side story. I was visiting a customer who was coming through town doing an arena tour, and I was talking to the tech, a guy named James. And James, he was using a long line, and he was showing me how it was integrated into the rigs. And he was using what was it? He was using, I think, might have been a GT16. He was definitely using the Meg X in the rack. Everyone had RJM gear. I was like, oh, what do you guys think about RJMs? Like, there's no other option. And then he went on to tell me all of the other touring guys he's come across using RJM stuff. And all of the touring guys love you, like absolutely love you. Anyone that has to do this for a living, it's just the only way. And then he told me about other MIDI controllers he tried using, like they didn't work. They broke after however many couple months of being on the road, or they didn't do what we wanted them to do. And so we just went back to RJM. And so it was really cool to, like, knowing you as we've known you over the years and everything like that. It was so cool to hear other people unprompted just say, like, yeah, it's just the best stuff. I don't have to question it. I just know it's going to work and do everything we want it to do. And so it was really cool to get that kind of feedback. I know Brian's gotten the same from his clients as well. And
same.
It's just really, it's great to see appreciation given where it's due, and to hear from the the professionals that have to rely on this stuff day in and day out. And so it was great. It was very encouraging to hear that on your behalf. Very encouraging, but it was cool to hear that as well. So keep it up, Ron. It's so cool seeing what you come up with, how your brain approaches this stuff, and what you guys end up with in these products. And I personally don't have anything more to add for today, or any more questions. Brian or Ron, I don't know if you guys have anything else at all either before we finish up, but. That's kind of it from my end.
Thank you. I'm excited for whatever else you have. I have ideas that I would like to pitch you. So just
if you haven't told me them before, definitely let me know offline. And that's one thing, we always listen to suggestions. We can't implement them all. Just there's not enough meat to go around. But
I remember I pitched you a junction box idea, and you said, I loved your response to it. You said, really great ideas, but that would probably cost $1,200 for a junction box. And I went, yeah, I know. It was just like, I thought of everything.
The kitchen sink.
Really great idea, but so I was like, I know, I'm just dreaming. So I'll pitch them offline.
I need you to write a script for me that motivates me to keep practicing guitar. So if you could
I need that more than
while they're free.
Right. I could do that. I think I wouldn't have to do anything else ever again. I'd probably sell millions, because
I think you'd be there.
Have that issue.
Sure. Love that.
For sure.
Well, thanks for joining us, Ron. Is this the third time or fourth time you've been on the show? Third time?
At least third. I'm not even sure. I
feel like it's three, but I could be wrong. Probably. We always love having you, though.
I don't know, but it's always great to be on with you guys, for sure.
Awesome. All right, we'll see you later, and have a good week, guys. We'll see you next week for another episode on the show.
All right, see you guys.
Yeah.